What is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority doing to help school districts and contractor fleets in the Empire State meet the impending zero-emission bus mandate deadline? In just a while, I'll share my interview with Vinny Riscica of NYSERDA to discuss that very topic. Welcome to the Route School Bus Fleets content series. I'm Wes Platt, Executive Editor. This episode of The Route is brought to you by our sponsor, Thomas Built Buses, a leader in pupil transportation. Please click like on this and all our other videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel, connect with us on Facebook, on the site formerly known as Twitter, and on LinkedIn. You'll find the links to our social media channels in the details of this video. Okay, let's get rolling. And when I say let's get rolling this time, I don't mean rolling papers, not yet anyway. Our first stop is Washington, D.C., where the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency at the end of April proposed reclassifying marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3 under the U.S. Controlled Substances Act. It's a big deal because for the first time in more than 5 decades, marijuana might no longer be considered in the same category as heroin. But it's nothing that is likely to change immediately. The DEA proposal goes next to the White House Office of Management and Budget for public comments. It could still face judicial review. It wouldn't take effect until 30 days after the final rule is published in the Federal Register. Once in effect, marijuana still wouldn't be absolutely legal. Instead, it would be illegal to possess only from licensed pharmacies with a doctor's prescription. It's going to be interesting to see how this affects federal drug testing procedures for drivers and other school transportation professionals. What do you think about the proposal? Let me know in the comments. While we're in the nation's capital, let's talk about the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration's proposed new safety standards that could apply to electric school buses. The proposed regulation, known as FMVSS number 305A, would replace and expand upon the existing FMVSS number 305. Key aspects of the proposed regulations include expanded coverage to heavier vehicles, such as large electric school buses, with a focus on post-crash safety measures related to electrical systems, alignment with international safety standards to ensure consistency in safety regulations across borders, enhanced documentation requirements for manufacturers to address evolving battery technologies and diverse vehicle designs, and standardized emergency response guides, or ERGs, and rescue sheets to equip first responders with vital information for safe handling during emergencies. NHTSA is accepting comments on the proposed rulemaking until June 14th. The proposed compliance date would be 2 years after the final rule is published. Small volume manufacturers, final stage manufacturers, and alterers would get an extra year to apply. Lots of news from DC, as you may have noticed, including the rollout of the Environmental Protection Agency's latest Clean School Bus Program funding opportunity. This time it's the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle Grant, providing as much as $1 billion for applicants, including school districts and contractor fleets. Applicants have until July 25th to submit their proposals for consideration, with selection notifications expected in November. At least $400 million of the funding pool is set aside for projects that target areas that fail to meet the national ambient air quality standards. It's a competitive grant process that will be based on the potential impact on disadvantaged communities, climate resiliency, sustainability, and workforce development. Learn more on the School Bus Fleet website. The link's available in the details of this video. Next, we'll stop in Richmond, Virginia, headquarters of the Propane Education and Research Council. PERC announced in April that they hired David Walters to replace Steve Whaley as Director of Autogas Business Development for the organization. Whaley left PERC in January to work for Bluebird Corporation on their alternative fuels team. Walters brings more than 25 years of expertise in business development and sales leadership in the energy industry to the job, including a focus on hydrogen and RNG. Most recently, he served as National Sales Manager at Atlas Copco Compressor where he directed business development and oversaw product integration across multiple North American regions. Next, let's go to New York and the headquarters of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. I recently had the chance to talk with Vinny Riscica, NYSERDA's senior project manager for clean transportation, including school buses. We discussed the state's zero-emission school bus mandate and how districts are overcoming obstacles to meet the deadlines ahead. Here's that interview. All right, so I am happy today to welcome Vinny Riscica from the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority to talk about the electric bus transition in New York State. Vinny, welcome to The Route.
Thanks for having me, Wes.
First, tell everybody a bit about your organization, what it does, what its purpose is, and your role in it.
Sure. So as you mentioned, NYSERDA stands for the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. We're a state authority that's essentially in place to help a lot of the stakeholders across the state fulfill our commitments to, reducing carbon emissions and, improving energy efficiency across the state in areas like buildings, energy systems, and transportation. I specifically sit within our clean transportation team, which is, as you would expect, focused on decarbonizing the transportation system across New York State. And my focus is really, at this point, specifically on school buses. So helping school districts and key stakeholders in public pupil transportation to transition to zero emission sources of transportation for students.
So let's talk a bit about the mandate that has been a subject of a lot of discussion in the last several months. What are its objectives and what are the timelines for getting New York switched over to electric school buses in the fleet?
Sure. So in 2022, Governor Hochul enacted the requirements to transition to a zero-emission fleet for school buses. There are two key dates. By 2027, all new purchases of school buses need to be zero emission. And then by 2035, the entire fleet of school buses across the state needs to be transitioned over to zero emission. We use the term zero emission because that's what's in the language. We note that that can include electric buses. It can also include other technologies like fuel cell electric buses. But at the current moment, really what's available out there and practical based on technology is electric.
Yeah, it seems to be like the main market out there is electric propane, maybe a limited number of compressed natural gas. And yeah, hydrogen fuel cell, I haven't heard any real rumblings of that anytime soon.
Now, yeah, I did want to just specify in terms of in New York State, the requirements are for zero emission. So I know that the EPA and some of the other federal programs allow for things like propane and compressed natural gas. But in terms of this specific program is requiring zero emissions.
Okay, so absolutely zero.
Yep.
No exceptions on that. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what are some of the funding opportunities and incentives that NYSERDA provides to support this transition? I know that this is kind of all still coming online, but in the last several months, I know y'all have been ramping some things up.
Yeah, absolutely. Really excited to talk about the support that we're able to provide to school districts. Obviously, we recognize that it's a big undertaking from a process perspective, but also there are new expenses, and with new technologies, we do see that the cost of the vehicles are a little bit higher. So later in 2022, after the requirements were set out, voters in New York State passed the Environmental Bond Act, which is a $4.2 billion program to help across all areas of supporting the environment in New York State, climate change mitigation and adaptation type programs. In that bond act, $500 million was allocated to support the transition to zero emission school buses. What NYSERDA has done is set up the New York School Bus Incentive Program. We call it NYSBIP here. And what that does is it helps allocate those funds specifically for school bus transition. So we have three main support areas at this point. We start off with the planning side of things. That's really important to get started now ahead of 2027. We want all districts to be able to work on a plan that's specific to their district and reflects, their topography, climate, their routes that they run, how they own and operate their buses, and so this planning support that we provide helps districts with that. What we do is we help pair districts with a consultant or a contractor who specializes in engineering and fleet electrification to develop that specific plan. NYSERDA and through the New York School Bus Incentive Program, through the Environmental Bond Act, we're covering 75% of the cost of developing that plan for non-priority districts, and then 100% of the cost of that plan for priority districts. So that's the planning side of things. In addition to that, we have funding to support the purchase of school buses. So as we noted earlier, the cost of electric school buses is considerably higher than diesel or gas buses right now. So our program focuses on what we call the incremental cost, or the cost difference between a diesel and gas bus and a comparable electric bus. The program is set up to basically start off at a base level of around 60% of that incremental cost, and then it adds on for different ways of qualifying for additional funds. So, for example, I mentioned priority districts earlier. These are districts that are serving disadvantaged communities across New York State, as well as those who are school districts who are identified as high need by the state. Those districts can get an additional $28,000 to $39,000 per bus. If you scrap an older bus, a diesel or gas bus that you're replacing with the electric bus, you can get an additional $47,000 to $65,000. And then there's add-ons for things like wheelchair accessibility and also vehicle to grid capability, which is the ability for the school buses, when they're not being used, to send electricity back to the grid. And so on the bus side, while we start around 60% of the incremental cost, you can get up to around 100% of the incremental cost of an electric bus by qualifying for all those additional adders. And then the last component is on the charging side. So obviously, transitioning from diesel and gas to electric, you need to be able to charge them. You can't just put fuel in your electric bus, obviously. So
can't plug it into an outlet. Yeah.
You can't plug it into a standard 110 outlet, that's for sure. On the charging side, for each bus that you purchase, you're eligible for a charging voucher. The charging vouchers start at around $25,000 for non-priority districts and $35,000 for priority districts. If you take the planning support that I mentioned earlier, and you complete a fleet electrification plan, you can add an additional $30,000 to that amount. While we know that a lot of chargers do cost less than $25,000, if you're talking about a sort of a lower level, pretty basic charger, it could be only, a few $1,000s, less than $10,000. But obviously, as you're talking about scaling up to an entire fleet of these vehicles, there are additional pieces of infrastructure that are needed on your site as a depot owner. Things like a step up or step down transformer, new wiring and conduit, a new panel potentially. So the additional funds for each of those charging vouchers can go toward things like that really help districts scale up. So even with one bus, you can help set yourself up for purchasing your additional buses without having to lay out additional funds on the infrastructure side.
It also seems like on the infrastructure side, building in some redundancy for those systems wouldn't be a bad idea, just because, I mean, if you run out of gas in your tank, you refill the tank. If your electric charger goes bad, you just have to replace it. So while you're
Yeah.
waiting to replace it, having that backup on hand is probably a good idea.
Yeah, that's true. And so, we talk about the idea of future proofing quite a bit, and
Mhm.
that's the ability to lay some of this infrastructure ahead of time. As I said, to reduce the costs of adding additional buses, but also, having different types of chargers. There are chargers
Mhm.
with, two plugs on them, or higher powered chargers that can really, quickly charge buses in the case of an emergency, in the case of, the level two or, lower powered chargers going down. So
Right.
you're really enabling some flexibility on the charging side, and really excited to see how districts take advantage of that.
So when we're talking about the criteria and qualifications that districts need to meet, what are you looking for? I know we've talked a bit about priority districts, but just say an average district or a contractor fleet. I'm assuming they can also be considered for this. What do they need to do to qualify for some of this funding?
Yeah, that's a great question. As you alluded to, we do have the priority districts, which I noted earlier. We've identified which districts are considered priority, but all districts, whether or not they purchase buses and own them directly, or they they have a third party contractor operating their buses, need to comply. So this program is open to the districts themselves if they want to purchase buses, or their contractors who can purchase the buses for use for those districts. In terms of eligibility for the program, any public school district can apply, and any contractor serving a public school district can apply. But we do have an eligible vehicles list in terms of the buses that are available. So there are specific requirements that manufacturers and then dealers have to meet to participate in our program. We keep that list up to date. Obviously, we understand that there's new technology coming online, every day, it seems like. So
Yeah.
we're keeping that up to date. And then we have eligibility criteria also around the charging infrastructure that can be can qualify for the program too. There's a lot of details about that, but for the districts themselves, we're trying to keep that limited to your public district. You can apply, and then working with the bus dealers and our what we call our voucher help center, to determine what is actually eligible.
One of the things we've heard about are some of the challenges and barriers that school districts are facing in adopting electric buses. And we've talked about a bit of that, but how are you as an agency, how is NYSERDA kind of easing the way for people? Because I know people look at 2027, it is not far away, 2035, not far away. And so I know a lot of people are worried about being able to implement this in time. So what kind of, public information campaigns and what other options are you giving to people to sort of feel more at ease?
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely understand that it's a big undertaking for sure. And part of the education law, sorry, the requirements in the education law about the transition to electric buses also required NYSERDA to put together a few resources for school districts and the state to guide this process. So we've developed what we call the electric school bus roadmap, and that's a document that we put out last September, and that'll be updated every 3 years. That includes information about the entire state, all the buses that we have, the grid, the utilities, and how all the different agencies in the state play a role in this process to make sure that it is a feasible transition. In addition to that, we also put out the electric school bus guidebook, and this is a series of ideally, and we've tried to keep these pretty short and in very basic language to really give the key stakeholders who are involved in the process, the district transportation director and school business official, your superintendents, an overview of the technology, how procurement is different for electric buses, what types of financial incentives are available out there, how electric buses are different in terms of operations and maintenance, safety, workforce development and training. So there's these short, 5 to 10 minute reads on each of these topics, and we're continuing to update those as technology increases and we get further into this transition as well. I will say, a lot of information we're pushing out to people, but we're also a resource for folks who want to come to us. We have an email address, schoolbus@nyserda.ny.gov, and we encourage all school districts to reach out to us through that. We encourage every district to complete a fleet electrification plan, and as I mentioned, we help with paying for that, but also help with the administrative side of that. So putting together a project that really meets the school district's individual needs. And what we're trying to do in that process is help districts identify the first route or two that they can transition to electric buses, get some experience, ideally, with the incentives that we have now before 2027. And what we're finding is with the districts we're working with through that process is we're reducing some of that reactivity and fear of the unknown. We understand it's scary, but once you get an electric bus and operate it, we're seeing a lot of positive response from school districts, from the drivers, from the mechanics, from students, obviously. They love their electric buses. And we're hearing about a lot of unintended side benefits, things like the buses are quieter, so I can talk to my friends. School bus drivers can hear their students and identify conflicts ideally before they happen. So a lot of stories like that are emerging as districts get started.
That's great. I'm going to kind of wrap things up here, but did you have any other topics, anything else we should cover before we go?
I think I said a lot,
Yeah.
and we're really excited about this, and we understand, as I said earlier, that it is a big undertaking, but we're here to support. And as I said, getting started with that first bus or two and developing a plan is really the way to go. We're here to help with that, and we've got plenty of resources to help districts. So thanks for the opportunity to cover all that.
Of course. And thanks for coming on the route. I've appreciated the time. And yeah, we'll be out sometime in mid-May. So I'm looking forward to that. And good luck with the implementation. I'm in North Carolina. We've started getting electric buses. I think the Cherokee tribal nation got their buses. And right here where I live in Durham, we're in the process. I think we've ordered some buses. So they'll be coming either for next school year or the year after, depending on where we're at in production. But it's an exciting time to kind of see how this technology evolves, and we'll see how it goes.
It is, Wes. Actually, I did want to, you brought something up that I think is really important is, even in New York State, we have these timelines for the transition. We're starting to see this happening all across the country. And there are mandates in some places, there are programs to support it, but I think the momentum is growing, and we're also hearing from the manufacturers that this is essentially where we're going to go because these buses are, at the end of the day, easier to operate and maintain.
Right.
And so we're really moving, I think we're at sort of the beginning of the wave of the transition to electric buses. So very exciting times.
All right, we'll ride it out, see where it leads. All right.
Sounds good.
Vinny Riscica, thank you so much for joining us from the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. We'll see you all again soon. Okay, it's time to park the bus for now. Thank you for watching. Please tell your friends about the route. The more, the merrier. If you've got news, reach out to me by email at wes.platt@bobbitt.com. Connect with us on LinkedIn and on Facebook. Sign up for our twice-weekly email newsletters at schoolbusfleet.com. Thanks again to our sponsor, Thomas Built Buses, a leader in pupil transportation. Drive safely, and see you next time on the route.